I want to get into the funding and sustainable development stuff, but just one side tangent. What are you having to use as a desktop right now?
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
So I have one machine with Mac OS, and I
Mhm.
have one with Ubuntu.
Okay.
Um, those are the two operating systems that we are targeting our first alpha release of
Mhm.
Ladybird for. So those are the ones I keep here.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are asking us about Windows.
I'm sure.
Some people send quite angry messages about Windows.
It's
Um,
like, oh, if you're not on Windows, you're never going to get any support. Oh, how can this project be a browser if it's not on Windows?
yes. Have you been writing these?
Don't worry, I've got plenty of similar angry comments on various things that I'm involved in.
Right. Yeah. So you're familiar with the general sentiment.
Oh, quite,
Um,
yes.
yeah. So the reality of our situation with funding is that we have 7 people that we can pay to work on this at the moment,
Mhm.
which is incredible for something that isn't even an alpha yet.
Mhm.
We're very, very happy to be able to do that, but we just don't have the manpower to target one more platform.
Mhm.
And we feel that putting out an alpha in 2026, we just have to focus on making the web work. Um, and we're starting with the platforms that we know best ourselves. And then we're just building everything in such a way that um, if you can port it to one platform, then it's not terribly complicated to port it to others.
Right.
And that said, there is a community effort to work on Windows support, which is ongoing. It's just not something that we are devoting full-time engineering to at the
Mhm.
moment. But they have been making progress on building. I know the JavaScript engine already works on Windows, and people are working on other parts of the browser. So when we eventually do make a commitment to Windows, we won't be starting from
Mhm.
like zero. There's uh, there's already some work happening.
So the idea is sort of you want to get something done on a platform you know rather than trying to tackle everything at once.
Yeah, exactly. Because putting out a super disappointing product on 3 platforms
Right.
versus putting out something that kinda works on 2 platforms,
Mhm.
we're gonna go with the latter. And really, we would probably scale back to a single platform if we believed that we could do a better job, but
Mhm.
it turns out that macOS and Linux are sort of similar enough that it's not terribly difficult to do both.
Mhm. Mhm.
But Windows is just it's a bit of a stretch to say that Windows is similar to the Unix
Right.
systems.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fair. Um, yeah, I think I think people kind of forget that sometimes that macOS is just Unix. It doesn't look like what you expect from Unix because it's fancy Apple graphical environment, but at the core, it's just a Unix kernel. Like, there's not. It's maybe they like don't want you to. They don't want most of their customers to ever think about that. They just want them to look at the fancy graphics. But yeah, it's not like, obviously Windows is a very different platform, right? Like there's just a whole different development philosophy that went into it. Yeah, I get why you've gone this route, and I would much rather prefer you to stick with something that I how would I say it? First impressions are very important, right? And you want to make
Mhm.
sure that what people see when you've not called it ready, but when you've called it, hey, this is our alpha. Yes, people are going to know it's an alpha, but look, people judge things how they see it. It doesn't matter if it's an alpha, it doesn't matter if it's a beta. It's the tagged release, it's out there, so this is how people are going to judge it. I've talked a lot with the guys doing the Cosmic Desktop, and it's the same idea where they are very particular about when they want this thing to be ready, and they waited a very long time before even starting the alpha. Basically, it was mostly complete when the alpha started, because
Mm.
if it was any earlier, if it crashed all the time, anything like that, that idea sort of it stays with a project even after those problems are resolved. Like Pulse Audio obviously has that stuck to it. System D has that stuck to it. Even though a lot of those early issues haven't been KDE, right? KDE 4 was a horrible release, and people still have that idea in their head because that's what it was like, so that's what it's always going to be like.
Yeah, very true. You only get one chance to make a first impression,
Mhm.
is what I'm always telling people. And we have to make an actual effort to make that first impression a decent one.
Mhm.
And this is why we don't provide like easily accessible nightly builds right now,
Mhm.
for example,
Is that a
because we
plan during
don't
the
want
alpha?
to. During the alpha, we're gonna make it available.
Mhm.
Yes, but right now, um, basically, a person who wants to try Ladybird but is unable to run the 2 or 3 shell commands required to build it themselves are 100% going to be disappointed by the product in the current state.
Mhm.
And so we put up this tiny little roadblock of saying you have to build it yourself. Here are the
Mhm.
commands, very very straightforward, just to avoid giving people like a bad experience for no reason,
Mhm.
basically.
Yeah.
And also, what we're looking for at the moment is really not users, but developers and sponsors. And so our messaging is geared towards that at the moment.
Mhm.
But that will obviously change um, as we put out an actual alpha version and start soliciting bug reports and um, whatever information we can gather from people without telemetry, obviously, or with some extremely opt-in form of telemetry.
Mhm.
I know that's an extremely sensitive topic, and
I've made my
yeah,
opinion very clear on that. My opinion, like in case you aren't aware, my opinion is if you opt into it, if you're informed, I literally don't care. Like, take a sample of my DNA. If you tell me exactly what you're taking, that's fine. I've agreed. This is the contract that I have agreed to. That's fine. But when it's opt out, it gets very. I am
yeah,
very opposed to it. I understand the developer perspective and why people want it, because you have, if you have opt in, you're going to be selecting for people who are more likely to be in certain groups, like maybe the more technical users who are going to be on certain kinds of systems, so you may not get a good representative sample. I understand why. I just don't like it.
yeah, yeah. It's true, but you have to make a compromise there, I think,
Mm.
and given what we can see in the browser industry with, let's say, major players shooting themselves in the foot repeatedly
Mm-hmm.
in various ways, we should, at the very least, try to learn from their mistakes and not repeat them. Um, let's at least find new mistakes to make. Um,
I
I
think one
think.
thing with opt out is if it's opt out from the start, people go into it knowing what to expect. It's when you change the deal along, like halfway through, right?
Yeah, very true. Yeah. Yeah. So we are gonna come into this with a everything is opt-in from the start,
Mm-hmm.
and we want to keep it that way. And it's just easier for us to um, be like sort of purist, I
Mm-hmm.
guess, about being opt-in if we just commit to that from the very beginning, because then it's obvious what we shouldn't do, that we shouldn't add any kind of telemetry that would be opt-out. Um, and yeah, some people are going to want to opt in, and bless them for doing that. We will probably figure out a way to collect primarily crash data, I guess,
Sure.
is what's going to be interesting. We certainly don't care about who's using the browser or what they're using it for. It's more about like, how does it crash,
Right, right, right.
or unexpected situations occurring in the field that we had not predicted, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Um, and yeah, it's unclear to me what is the absolute best way of doing this, because I think you can't ever please everybody.
Sure.
There are some extremely hardcore privacy people who Like you could say, for example, we offer an opt-in telemetry,
Mhm.
or you can say, well, we have two binaries, one with opt-in telemetry, one with it
Right.
compiled out. And that's still not good enough for some people. They demand that it shouldn't even be in the source code,
Mhm.
and so on. And I think we'll find like a reasonable point there where we can make most people trust what we're doing.
Mhm.
And obviously, everything is open source and inspectable and so on.